Coming up to visit the Adena Mansion and Gardens historic site, managed by the Adena Mansions and Garden Society. We've arrived in the parking lot and we're going to walk up toward the mansion where Thomas Worthington, wife and family lived when he was governor of the state of Ohio. We're walking toward the west side of the building, which would be actually the back of the mansion. And to the left will be the kitchen quarters. Now, Thomas Worthington and his family did have slaves that operated the estate up here for him. There are slave quarters still on premises. Slaves would prepare all the meals. Now, Thomas Worthington's wife did like to go out into the garden and pick roses, and we'll come up to the garden here in a few minutes, but we'll just go visit the kitchen. So this is the smokehouse, and during the winter, hams and bacons were preserved in the smokehouse for use throughout the year. The meat was treated with sugar and a salt cure, and in a large trough at the back of the room for about 6 weeks. Hams and bacon were hung from the ceiling joists, smoked with a smoldering hardwood or corncob fire until a glaze formed on the meat and repelled insects and retarded spoilage. So this is the wash house where the servants did the Worthington laundry in this building, as well as soap and candle making. Workers kept the wood dry in the room behind the fireplace, and a well on the edge of the porch was a convenient source of water. The laundry room. Now the sign said servants, although we know it was slaves. This was the servants' hall. The north end of each wing functioned as servants' quarters. This room served as the servants' hall. The central table served as a workplace for polishing silver, repairing things, and sewing. Here the household staff took their meals or sat around talking during their limited time off. A stairway in the alcove at the rear of the building led upstairs. Servants' hall. We've now approached the front of the building. So the carriage horses would come up the gravel driveway.
I don't think it was gravel then.
And would arrive at the front of the mansion. This is the front of the mansion. So this will be the Adena Gardens. In 1815, Worthington hired indentured servants to create the 3 terraces that define the Adena Gardens. Each terrace measures about 100 by 200 feet. Terracing was a commonplace of the Virginia plantation gardens in the 1700s. While Virginia terraces were typically covered by lawns, Worthington laid out the gardens and the terraces at the Adena as a flower garden, a kitchen garden, and a vineyard with fruited vines and shrubs. We'll take a quick walk around the 3 terraces of the gardens. Top terrace being all the floral shrubbery and flowers. Now, as we come down to the next terrace, we'll walk down about 5 steps. We'll walk down to the produce section of the vineyards. Here we have some nice looking corn. So this would be where the servants would gather the produce for the nightly meals. That is some kind of a squash. We have tomatoes. Looks like some green peppers. And it looks like a few other things. And moving on down to the 3rd terrace would be where we have all the vineyards for growing grapes to eventually ferment into wine. And on this terrace, Thomas Worthington grew his grapes and other small fruits. And with these, Eleanor Worthington, his wife, and servants, or slaves, made wine and preserves. And at least once, he also grew potatoes here. Over time, it looks like the grapes have kind of dwindled. But and on this terrace, Eleanor Worthington supervised the servants who grew the fresh vegetables and fruits needed for dining. To teach the children the skills they needed to run their own homes, she gave them their own garden plots to tend. Walking back up to the flower terrace, and as you can see, Eleanor had rooms looking over the terrace where she could sip her tea, drink her coffee that the servants delivered to her, and look over her beautiful rose garden. Again, the front of the mansion, where guests would arrive in horse and carriage, up the cobbled pathway to be greeted by the Worthing family. Now, additionally, on the property, we have the spring house. The Worthingtons used the spring house as an extension of the kitchen. It served a purpose similar to our modern refrigerators. They stored their dairy products in crocks set in troughs on the floor, and spring water flowing through the building kept them cool. Eleanor Worthington spent a great deal of time here supervising the production of cheese and other dairy products. And we are approaching the spring house. There is a naturally running spring. This is built on the original foundations. This is where the spring house was located at. And as you can see, the trough in the floor where the water is naturally flowing. So the slaves would sit in here, make their butter, and what else?
Cheese.
And cheese. See the water flowing?
Oh, this is a different area.
Just another trough. Seems like we do have a patch of cattails that are growing down toward the spring house. The spring house, the spring fed the pond, and then we'll go from the pond back up to the slave quarters. So the building as we are approaching, coming up on, is where all the slave quarters were located. Small, simple structures, such as this one, were scattered around the Worthingtons' vast land holdings. Tenants agreed to farm the Worthingtons' land in exchange for a house to live on. Tenants were usually men who could not afford their own property. Cabinet maker George McCormick lived here in 1807. Just a simple tenant's quarter. Fireplace on one end. Simple furniture. Humble belongings.